Good morning. Thanks once again for assembling. Thanks for assembling for the next session. Our session is going to be run by Arjun Pratap, partner, Deloitte. It's a very interesting topic. 2 years ago when this came in from MCA on audit trail and how it was deciphered. Year 1 was very interesting. Year 2, it was a lot of toned down. 25 was a further year. Interesting part on audit logs, this is one of the circulars only in India. Globally itself, tracing audit logs or maintenance of audit logs and part of your audit report, I think globally it's anywhere in the world except India. So Arjun is partner, Deloitte, now 20 years experience, part of the risk advisory team. He does a lot of work on technology, known in various forums as well, and on cyber readiness, etc. He's done quite a bit of research. Part of ISACA, he's got various certifications, the latest being the AI certification, which is from the ISACA body, CFE and also CRAC. So thanks again, Arjun. So it's a hour and 10 minute session. Hopefully we'll close at 12:55. We have lunch and then followed by 5. Back to all yours.
A very good morning, and thank you very much, Ravi sir. Thank you very much, IIA Madras chapter, for giving this platform. Pretty happy seeing all of you after last year, I should say. So I think sir said the context in terms of how audit trail had become one of the most discussed topic the last couple of years, with MCA bringing about rules and regulations around audit trail. But let me just break the ice here. It is, while we will touch upon MCA related matters, we are not going to entirely discuss about what MCA is asking for. We can have questions, that we can discuss around the specificities of, the MCA audit trail implementation related challenges and what the auditors are looking at today. All of that is fine. But today we wanted to, deep dive and look at a larger aspect in terms of why audit trail all of a sudden. I mean, audit trail has always been there. You are internal auditors, most of you are, right? And you have been depending on this particular traceability in a transaction. Long time ago it was vouching, and then you had digital records coming in, ERP system related logs coming in, and then you relied on those to perform your audits, right? So this isn't a newer concept, but what has suddenly changed that there is more and more emphasis coming through. Now that's what we will lightly touch upon, and then go into details in terms of why is it getting repurposed today, what are the aspects that you will have to look at when you would want to talk about and cover audit trail in your organization. We will also look at a couple of use cases where as auditors you can pick up audit trail, pick up signals from different application systems, from different devices, and how see how there is a pattern and how you can make a sense of all of that, right? And then we will get into the detail of what are the real challenges in doing this, right? And more so now, where there's a lot of chat around AI coming through. How is AI going to impact audit trail, as well as how is AI going to help enable this particular audit trail related analysis and functionality that we are going to do. And that is what is something that we would want to cover today, right? And as I had mentioned earlier, while audit trail was a known concept, with more and more digitalization today, largely every business, even probably a tea seller is also using some kind of a computer device or another for their business transactions, right? And therefore there is good amount of digitalization that has happened. Now with more and more digitalization happening, more and more digital footprints are happening. And therefore from an audit point of view, as auditors, you being an internal auditor or an external auditor, what is more interesting or important is that how you can use this information or data, right? Where is it all lying? How you can source this information and how you can use it in your audit is what we are going to look at and talk about. What it also changes as a mindset for each one of us is, while traditionally, an internal auditor was more focused around business operations, even today it is the case, yes, but there is a little bit of technical lens that we will start wearing, right? Where we are expected to understand technology, because technology has become the baseline for most of the businesses that are being conducted. There are different systems, ERP applications, bolt-on tools, SaaS, cloud platforms that are all coming in. So the better you understand technology, the better you are able to make sense of all of this in the way you perform your audit. And that's what we are trying to push together. So eventually this changing role of an internal auditor from a core functional person to a very techno-functional person, right? And that's what we are trying to aim and look at. And audit trail is just one building block in all of that, right? And which is why when the MCA also rolled this out, as a specific audit trail circular, Ravi mentioned that, India is the only country, which had brought out a regulation on audit trail. Well, globally there are many frameworks, globally there are many, standards which talk about audit trail, what needs to be captured, but there are more technical standards. But the Ministry of Companies Act, from an accounting point of view, they brought this out because there were certain ground level issues, right? So let's say, for example, I'm not specifically, I'm just giving an example, doesn't mean that, this particular software really had an issue. Let's say somebody was using a Tally, a very bare bone version of Tally, making a transaction, recording his sale, and then after some time, just before filing his tax return, he's deleting that particular transaction, right? He goes ahead and files sale transaction as to, whatever is his income, but his actual income earned or, accounted for initially is X number. And when he's reporting to the tax authorities, he's kind of deleting it and then he's reporting a lower number. This is one primary reason why the government had come up with, why all softwares or accounting softwares will have to have audit trail. The issue popped up when GST audits were conducted, because on one side, on one leg of the transaction, somebody would have filed a GST return. On the other leg, it would not have appeared in the record because the person who is being audited would have already deleted that particular transaction, and there is no trace that this deletion has happened, right? And therefore, the mandate came to ensure that all accounting records have an audit trail in place. All application systems that are going to have these accounting records will have to have audit trail in place, and they very clearly stated as to, when we are saying audit trail, what is all that which is to be captured. Now, that is the India story, recent story in terms of, how these things are all happening, and with more and more digitalization, they want to bring it as a building block, right? But largely, if you look at it, where audit trail is going to really help is, it is going to help you troubleshoot any issues or any problems that you've had. Right? That is the fundamental purpose, basically a traceability for anybody who would want to fix a particular issue, and that's why I'm logging a particular event. Now, I'm going a little bit more technical here, going a little bit more beyond, accounting parlance. When we are logging events, this could be a simple user access failure also, right? Somebody is trying to log in, and they are not able to log in because probably their password had expired, right? But then it creates a record somewhere. And when the technical person is able to evaluate why that particular activity is not being pushed forward, then based on the log, they understand that there is a password which has already been expired, and that is getting logged somewhere. This was the primary purpose, to have these logs in place. So if there are any system deficiencies, if there are any system challenges, any transaction processing issues, somebody can go back, look at the root cause of it, and then fix that issue, right? And that's what we call as, post-event analysis or, reconstruction of an event. Now, that's a very simple, elementary level of, why an audit trail is required and what it is helping us with. Now, imagine there were, some huge scandal which has happened in the organization. Somebody has tried to fool a process which is already in place. You're going to reconstruct that, right? And that is where, your digital footprints in terms of, what are the, let's say, for example, somebody has done a purchasing related fraud, right? You go back in the system, understand how the purchase order was initially issued, whether the materials have come in. For materials to have come in terms of existence, you go and physically see that the materials have come in. What if it had been consumed? Then there is a system record, and then you have segregation of duties. Therefore, who has placed that system entry in terms of, the material coming in? So how do you kind of put all of this together and reconstruct this at a larger level is able to help. And then that is where this, especially for internal auditor, if you're able to understand, where all this information is lying and how it can be used, it is a gold mine to look at, right? And little bit forward, if you end up doing an investigation, right? Now, all these system records also become a code producible evidence, provided you have adequate chain of custody. That is, you have ensured that the data that you have extracted or the logs that have been created have not been tampered with or not, right? So with that, it becomes a code producible evidence as against your traditional, other sets of evidence, because here you are able to easily reconstruct, the events that have happened with, whatever issue that have occurred, and then you are able to make sense out of it, right? So, and therefore, it helps you in a court of law to the extent that you are able to prove the chain of custody. Most importantly now, because it has all these benefits and advantages, the regulators have also started pushing for this. Right, in India, as we had discussed, the MCA a couple of years ago had come up with the audit trail, accounting related audit trail aspects. And the Reserve Bank of India, they have already been having it through their master circular directions on technology and cyber security related aspects. The certain also very clearly mandates that through the guidelines that organizations will have to have network traffic related audit trail, so that if in the case of any attack or any event, they analyze that particular audit trail and then they report back to the regulator. The barebone base in terms of, what all can be captured under audit trail, how it is important, what is the baseline standard, the global NIST is the best benchmark on that, right? Based on which the US HIPAA Act, the PCI DSS, all of it had, further evolved. But the baseline today, if you look at it in terms of, how audit trail will have to be captured, what are the details that have to be captured, it is from NIST. And that's what we have captured out here. Typically, any audit trail, if you look at, will have to have, in terms of the originator of that particular transaction or an event, which means, from which group it has come through, what is the type of event that has happened. Therefore, you have a description for that very clearly called out. Who had, an individual, if it's an individual or if it's a system, based on the unique user ID that the organization has assigned to a particular user, who has actually initiated that particular transaction. Now that is very clearly expected to be recorded. There could be many system to system interchanges. Today we talk about APIs, application program interfaces, where one system talks to another system. In such a scenario, how do you identify, that this particular event or transaction has happened through a system to system talk? So you call it out, in terms of who is that particular actor who has, enabled or initiated this transaction. Then what action has happened? Is there a new record which was created? Is there, a modification that has been enabled for an existing record? Was there a deletion which has happened? Right? Many sophisticated or robust systems today, let's say if you take an SAP or an Oracle, it by default does not allow you to go and delete a journal entry. I mean, again, going back to an MCA circular based this one. So when this circular came, it was a little bit of a difficult situation for sophisticated software application vendors, because they by default had immutability in it. But then the institute topped it up, the CA Institute topped it up with an implementation guide which expected the auditors to also go ahead and check if not just on the application level, wherever the data is stored, typically the database, on the database side, if any data can be modified or altered. Typically the tampering related check which will have to be performed. So how that is being enabled, and then that's when sophisticated applications like Oracle or SAP or even BAN for that matter, they all had issues in terms of performance issues, right? So it is easier to log, but then the moment I log every keystroke, it's going to create more and more records. And your storage cost is going to go up. Most importantly, your performance is going to go down. Right? So that was a, kind of a, catch-22 situation for many companies, but then they have over time evolved and then understood, what the real objective or expectation is that of that particular regulation, and then they've tried to figure out a way around it. We'll look at that also, but Essentially, that is what it is talking about. So when you are performing an action, what is that action that has actually happened? Is that a deletion? Is that a modification? Is that a creation? Then when it had happened, that's the most important thing, right? Without that timestamp, without that very clear system timestamp being there, there is no point in again having an audit trail, because you will not be able to reconstruct. We talked about code producible evidence. Now, without this information, no court will also admit this as a permissible evidence, because if the moment it does not have a timestamp and you're not able to effectively demonstrate that this application is so robust enough, that even though there is no timestamp, you can reconstruct that, then it becomes a failure in the first design stage itself. This is something, again, NIST very specifically calls out. So if you look at it, in terms of, where, if you are a multinational organization, if you're a global organization, it is always advised to have tags attached, right? Where a particular audit trail event has occurred, right? In the case of, network traffic, let's say if you ask a cyber guy based on the IP, that cyber guy will be able to tell where was the origin of this particular transaction or an event. If somebody is trying to attack, based on the IP number, IP address, they'll be able to tell which was the geography from where it was able to, it can be traced back to. So similarly, for any transaction, general NIST advisory is that, you also capture the information on the geography source of it. But when it comes to MCA, they were very clear, because it was only talking about books of accounts. All they wanted to know was who, when, and what. Right? Who has made the change? What kind of change has happened? It could be a new journal creation, it could be a modification to an existing journal, or a reversal entry that has happened, or even a deletion, but then all that event will have to be logged in. And what typically is the description or that particular journal account, GL account, if it is a purchase order, then which particular order number, what was actually changed in that particular order number, that detail is expected, so that you can very well reconstruct as to what exactly has happened. Now, this is the overall boundaries around which, typically audit trail happens, irrespective of whether it is a business requirement, operational requirement, or a technology-based requirement. Now let us quickly, I know it is a little bit, sometimes, it goes, over the top, looking at, what is expected and all of that. Let's look at how it can be put to use, right? So we will take up a case of a restaurant chain. All of us use Swiggy, Zomato, we eat out quite often nowadays, right? So we understand how this operates, if not as somebody who operates it or, who works with any of these companies, but at least as a consumer, right? Now, if you look at it, this is the POS systems log that has come out, right? On the face of it, it talks about multiple transactions that has happened. There are certain things which are fulfilled, which means the kitchen order token has been processed, and then they have fulfilled and completed the order. There are certain cases, where it has been cancelled also. If you would take a little further peep into it, right? And this is where logging really helps, and what you're logging also really helps. The cancelled transactions are largely cash transactions, right? As internal auditors, you will also think that we use analytics in many places. We try and figure this out, but what it also is trying to say is that with the amount of information that is available in a log, to what extent or depth is it that you can go towards, right? Now, if you look at the first instance, now that's a cancellation of a cash transaction. See, somebody is actually walking into, what's actually happened is, somebody is walking into a hotel. They have initiated, a sit and eat out, but then they've cancelled the order, right? Now, that has happened on 14th of September, 2025 at 5:12 p.m., right? Now, if you just double click and look at the data log for that particular record, while it is not coming in this information, in many cases, you will have metadata coming in where, it appears as a, at a header level or a line item level, right? In SAP, that's what we call as. So at a line item level, if you look at it, this particular cancellation has happened on 29th of September, not on the same day. Why is it that somebody who has walked into a restaurant on a particular day has done a cash transaction, but the cancellation, if you are actually looking at, is happening on a differently. Now that helps you analyze if that there are any patterns, right? And in this case, we see that all of it are all pertaining to cash transactions. This is just whatever example is shown has also happened, and currently we're also being investigated. So we are not pulling out the real restaurant chain's name and all of that, but wherever it is cash, they understand that that is an area where it is outside of system or there is no other corroborative evidence that you will have. If it is UPI, you have a UPI transaction log, which is external and you can refer to. If it is through, Zomato or Swiggy, you have data coming in from Zomato, Swiggy, so you, as an auditor, you will obviously compare. But then, interestingly, if you look at it, in all cash transaction related areas, this has come through, right? And that tells you of that, there is a pattern, and all of these transactions, while I have not blown it up, all the cancellations have actually happened on one single day. This was a classic case of underreporting of sales. They have performed a sale transaction, at a restaurant chain, but they did not want it for taxation reporting purposes, be it GST or be it income tax. But then the whoever was operating that particular restaurant chain had deliberately deleted that particular transaction or cancelled that particular event, right? Now, what we are actually telling about is like from an audit trail point of view, while this could be, blatantly open for you, okay, there are cash transactions, I see that they are knocked off, but then how do we go? You are just sitting at the tip of the iceberg. What does your systems today, help out with, to what detail you can dig in, right? Now, with more and more UPI coming in, now this is how the regulators have also investigated this particular case. The general trend was that, it was a 95% digital transaction because the usage of physical cash has significantly reduced today, right? 95% was physical transaction, digital transaction, and only 5% was cash transaction. As against in this case, we are noting that 60% was digital and 40% was cash. Now that's again an information that you are able to pick it up from the type or nature of source that you are able to try and log it in, right? And that's why if we go back to the earlier slide, we talked about what all information can be captured. The more information you have and what kind of relevance you are able to attach to it, you are able to perform better analysis or build a better story around it. Another aspect is that, and this is something as a very basic internal audit check that anybody will do, right? You look at the invoice number sequencing and then see that if there are missing numbers, then there are some problems around it. Sorry, go ahead. No. So that's right.
Transferring from the department.
Correct.
So how do we address it?
So one is if we are to make this, I hope the others also understood the question. I heard ask.
SAP.
Yeah, even the same issue arises even with Oracle. Even in this particular case, the accounting system could be something different. This is a POS system, the point of sale system, where they actually punch in the hotel bill, right? And then it will be transferred to a tally for that matter. Or if it's a big hotel chain like a McDonald's or something, it can even go to an Oracle or something of that sort, right? So today, the MCA's requirement is that once you have recorded a financial transaction, which means what is coming into your books of accounts, right? And that is where they are very clearly stating as to what should you scope in as books of accounts. It could be your primary ERP where your journal entries are getting recorded and your GLs are being made up of, right? It could be your feeder systems from where these transactions are originating. For example, let us say you have a supply chain system from where your goods receipts are getting recorded, and then from there is a transfer into your system, and therefore now that particular application system becomes a in scope application system for the purposes of audit trail from an MCA point of view. Now, if any of these application systems are not classified as relevant from a books of accounts point of view, legally you do not have any requirement to have audit trail. That's the reason many companies call out and state that why I do not maintain audit trail logs for those other operational systems or handoff systems where it is not legally mandated. Many times the auditors also look at it, understand there will be another system where the transaction will happen, but eventually the accounting record will be manually entered in SAP or Oracle for that matter. For example, payroll. You will have, let's say, an SAP SuccessFactors or an Oracle Workday or any other, even a Zoho payroll application or a Darwin box. Many times they will not talk to SAP, right? They will be a standalone system. And all the payroll will be computed over there. Then they will bring in a manual element of somebody reviewing and verifying that the payroll is computed appropriately, and a manual journal entry gets posted in SAP based on that document. Now, in those cases, you can also interpret and infer that now that Darwin box application system is not relevant for you, because while you take the information and data from over there, while only the master records are over there, you do a manual review. They will state that. This is an application which has other manual intervention, therefore I'm not considering. Then only SAP comes into play.
Actually, this scenario, this incident, which is under investigation till, it's very unique because there is lots of time delay also which has happened. Because the event has occurred in the month of, I think, if I'm not wrong, it was in April or May. And then the transaction entries in SAP was posted almost by December. So there is already a time gap. So even if I'm going to have a trail, I have all trail. GR entries are there, service received, all entries have been made, ACS have been made. But still it is not the actual proof because actual event has happened in a
different system.
Rather it was out of the system.
Right.
Because SAP entry, I mean the only when the indenter makes the GRV for the service entry sheet when it's made, that's when the transaction is actually recorded in SAP.
Right.
Whereas whatever has happened
before that, there's
MCA
no doesn't strictly
so as a
ask
good governance, the management should ensure, right?
Yes.
So that's what is the gap
Correct.
currently
that's what is
in
the
this.
Gap. Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
And which is what we wanted to also highlight. That's why I said while the discussions around audit trail has kind of increased after MCA had brought this circular, their purpose was very limited to books of accounts not being tampered with. Right? But an organization can lose money, there could be leakages, there could be better ways of working, even leave out the fraud angle to it. Is there a way where you can go about doing business in a more efficient manner? Your digital footprints can really help you do that, right? Where you can repurpose your sales strategy and understand where are those real footfalls coming in from if you're in the retail business. If you're, let's say, in an industrial manufacturing business, how do you use your work in progress? How long does it stay over there? All that, if there is information logged and available, it is always helpful. But we will also look at that specifically. What are the challenges in also getting all of these logs in place? What other complications that it would create is also something that we will look at. But here, in this particular case, what we wanted to specifically highlight is the issue around a simple log. If you have captured it effectively, what further analysis you can do, what further deep dive you can do, and what are the areas beyond the topical issues that you note that you can go down to, right? If somebody is doing a comparison with usage of electricity in that restaurant, consumption of materials in that restaurant vis-a-vis the sales that have been performed, then as those many items which have not been used or which has not been consumed has gone as waste. How have they recorded that, right? Because end of day, while they are saying that I have only sold 60% of my 100% of sale, did I throw away the 40% food that I have made or the raw materials which is still there, right? So all that correlation comparison is something that we could make. Hello, check. Yeah. is something that we could make. And you might also think that, why more around fraud investigation for internal auditors. There are two reasons for it. Number one, if you look at the many fraud surveys, including the ACFE's fraud surveys, the first point of identification or notification of any fraud is from the internal auditor, right? Because you're so close to the process, you understand it, you look at it on a very regular basis, you are more prone to identify an issue lying there because you can get to see that pattern and how that pattern recognition evolves with more and more systems coming into place is what we are looking at. The other aspect is that, even for your own internal audit purposes, you have been having this data or information already in some place or the other. How do you effectively use that is what it is, right? Now, let's go to another case, more similar, but a little bit of more data points around it, right? So this is an omni-channel retailer. You can kind of correlate it with Chroma or Reliance Digital. I'm not saying they are those, but you can correlate it with one of them. This is a timestamp of a transaction that has happened, and then it has hit the POS system. It could be online, it could be offline physical store, right? And why we are talking about online and offline both is something that we will look at. Now, the first case is completed, which means that the customer has paid for it and the transaction is through. The second transaction, if you look at, has happened at around 2:22 p.m. It records at microsecond level, and for a particular stock keeping unit. You can assume it has an iPhone 16 versus the previous one was an iPhone 17. If you look at, there is a pending tag out here, right? Here, pending tag simply means that, these are transactions which have been ordered by a customer, but it is on cash on delivery. All right. Now you see one other transaction coming in out here. Notice another pending, same risk. Very good. So we've already started sensing it. So it's a repeat order for the same item, coming in from the same IP address as he had rightly mentioned, and it is again in pending, which means somebody has ordered it on cash on delivery basis, right? Now let's see what further we can look at it, right? Now, if you kind of further blow it down, you could see that, many of these transactions, coming in for the same stock keeping unit from the same IP address, all right? Now, what's the risk out here? Now, if it is COD, you're actually getting the items delivered and you're going to collect cash once you do the delivery. Now, what has happened in this particular case is that the customer or the so-called customer has placed an order and then had eventually cancelled it after a few days, right? Now, what happens? Now, if let us say a competitor wants to really pull you down, they can kind of place these kind of covered attacks where based on the order you are going to allocate your stock and keep it aside, right? And then there is a store customer who is walking in, you are not able to service him, or there is a genuine online customer who is walking in and then you are not able to service him, right? So the more orders, if you see, are getting blocked around those and you are not able to service that particular customer, where at the same time, eventually these sales are not converting into actual sales, they're getting cancelled, and therefore your materials are coming back to your warehouse, and you again have the issue of not being able to service the customer at the right time. Now, if you look at retail industry, many of it is all like on the go, like people, the moment impulsively they walk into a store, they would want to buy, or they decide and they come, they want to buy. If the stock is not there, then they move on to the next store or wherever it is available. Online, they come ahead and check if that stock is not available, but then here all along you have been given a false impression that you're making more sales, but eventually you're not, right? And that's what it is about. Now here the interesting part is that not all of this data is from a single system, right? If you are an auditor, you would, it looks as simple as that. You would want to have all this information in one place, but not one single system actually records this, right? If you look at the blue highlighted one, That is from your transaction processing system, where you have the stock keeping, the inventory details, what kind of order has been processed, how it is being done, and all of that, right? The purple one, if you look at, is actually from your network traffic. You basically see anybody can use from the same computer system 2 different user IDs. So in your transaction processing system, it will typically tell you these 2 are different user IDs. So you will believe that this is a genuine order. If you would want to further, make any blocking or anything of that sort, right? But in these cases, because you were able to monitor your network traffic, and from your network devices, you are able to take those logs and then compare it with this particular order. Now that comparison is again a tedious task. You will have to know which network traffic ping at what time actually pertains to which transaction order in my order processing system. Now, if you are able to do that, then you will be able to easily bring out a pattern out here that from the same IP, somebody is actually bringing out false orders and then placing it so that they are trying to sabotage your business, right? And that is where it is important. And then this risk score is something that I will come back, after talking about this next slide. So basically what this eventually helps you as an auditor is you can actually advise your organizations, your company in terms of where you will have to really put in place a control. In this case, if there is a leakage, you can actually scan the traffic that is coming from. You see that there is a pattern. Now this pattern can be created as a risk control, right? And then put in you must have had other sessions around continuous control monitoring and all of that, but then this is the bare bone of all of that. Like unless you have all of this, you cannot move into the next stage of, intelligently analyzing stuff, right? And that is where again, logging becomes very, very important. Now, again, as I had mentioned, it will also call for a little bit of more expertise to understand where in all these information are available, right? By just looking at an order processing system and then eventually when it lands to an ERP, it is the destination system, right? But then what we are all more interested about in analyzing a pattern is about, where it is actually originating from. The first touch point is your firewall gateway. And that's where your network devices, come into play. And as I had mentioned earlier, that's where you will slowly start looking at it more in a more sophisticated manner, where a technology lends to it, right? And then do that techno-functional kind of an analysis in terms of how all of this does make sense. See, eventually technology is only an enabler. It is trying to help out when you have more information and logs around it. How you are going to pick it up and make sense of it is what is very important out here, right? And what can you do? Now you understand that, there are patterns or there are schemes that external parties or attackers are operating where from a particular IP, more than one order comes on the same day, then it should actually raise an alert for you. Now that's how you go. There is an event which has happened. That's how you go and identify that, this can be a possible alert. The moment an alert gets generated, then somebody is expected to analyze that particular alert. Now that's something is what, as a control that you can put it in. Now you can also define certain thresholds. Like say for a country like India, we're a huge population, and then everybody, even a mobile phone, will have an IP, right? And therefore, the amount of traffic is going to be huge. There could be multiple orders from the same user ID. For a simple example, let's take the case of IRCTC. When the Tatkal ticket timing opens up at 10 in the morning, the amount of hits that particular server will have is going to be humongous. And there will be 1 or 2 lucky computer devices which will have that access the moment first time. Then everybody will want to use the same IP to go ahead and book. So from a business point of view also, you will have to understand that by putting in a control, you're not blocking further business, but you critically define a threshold. If more than 10 tickets are booked from the same ID, I think IRCTC has about two times you can use for a Tatkal for the same ID on the same day. For the same train, something like that, right? Now, this will eventually help you get defined patterns and also help avoid sabotages, right? Now, that's one information that you get. Now, portal restriction, I'll again go back here. Now, if you look at it, the IP addresses, there are some IP addresses which are successful, which have come from 122, 223, 106. Now, that is where, you closely work with your technology team, your IT infrastructure team, and your, information security office to understand how do you make sense of these IP address logic, right? It could be that the 45 ones are coming from a different geography altogether. So therefore, there is a serious attack threat that is coming to you. When there is an attack threat coming to you from a different geography outside of India, and let's say if it has materialized, from a compliance point of view, going back, you are expected to report it to certain. Right? You're expected to report any attack that has happened onto your organization to certain, within a given period of time. And if you don't understand all of this, then you will not be able to, get that. Today, in many cases, many organizations, they do not even know. If you start analyzing, looking at, and then compare two different sets of data, and then if you are able to make that relevance, and that's when you will really understand, what are the different kinds of attacks that we are into. Right? And then there is also a non-compliance issue. Now you have noted that there is an attack, and then you should have reported back to certain of the government of India. And if you have not done that, then that becomes a problem. Right, and now coming to the main topic. So this calls for 3 important questions for us, right? So with so much of data, so much of information, what is it that we are going to log, right? Now, as she had rightly pointed out, there will be lots of operational reasons that the company will bring out in terms of storage costs, in terms of performance issues on what I should log. Right? And there is just too much of information that gets logged also. And with too much of information getting logged, you get lost in volume. Right? So therefore, it is very, very critical when you do your internal audit planning. It is very important, when you start with it, you clearly understand, you take up one particular area, you understand where are all the digital footprints that is expected for this particular area. Right? And then try and kind of reverse the way you are doing the audit, and then understand, identify these checkpoints. It could be technical data, it could be information security related data, it could be your order processing system. See if this can be compared and correlated. Maybe do a workshop with your other stakeholders, be it the CISO's office or the CRO's office, and understand where all of this data is coming from. Then you will be able to clearly identify a link or pattern, and then going on from there, understand whether all of this information that you will want is logged or in many cases it will be logged and will be overwritten also, right? So that's another issue that we have. Yes, there will be a first-hand log that will happen, then it gets overwritten in the next one day or even the next few minutes also. So it will get you to understand, what is that information that is getting logged. First of all, do you have all the information you want it to be logged? If not, ask for that. Number 2, look at the retention period or the storage period for that particular log, so that you can take it out and then make sense of that. Now, the next aspect in terms of, as I had mentioned, this humongous volume of data. Now, if we had performed the first exercise of understanding how each of these logs are going to make sense of, then you will be able to clearly make sense of, how to draw a pattern around it. And if you would want to further do any data mining and other analysis exercises, there are tools around it which you will be able to, use and take help of. We'll again look at that a little deeper. And third one, most importantly, while we do capture a lot of information with now with DPDP also coming in, with so many other, if you are in the healthcare industry, you have, more concerns around, sensitive data being held with you. DPDP, as I had mentioned, any PII information is sitting in that particular log that you are looking at. How will it have to be treated? So that becomes very, very important. So you understand, number 1, the log, what needs to be logged, how you are going to retain it, what analysis or information processing you're going to do with that particular log or with multiple logs. As we had seen in the previous example, it wasn't one log that we were relying on. We were relying on comparing multiple logs, right? So how we are going to do that, and eventually how we are going to act on the sensitivity of the information that you're having. So it also calls for you to understand, whatever information that you're taking in is how relevant it is. If it is relevant, what are the other sensitivities attached to this particular data? Is it a private information? Is it a health related information? So what kind of additional protection that will have to happen on that particular data? Again, as internal auditors, compliance officers, you're very much interested to look into all of those. Just a blow up on that in terms of, how do you consolidate? As long as you have structured information, and again, today we have AI and ChatGPT, kind of Gen AI helping us in making sense of multiple, earlier uncorrelated data to make more correlated meaning today, right? So how much of structured information you are able to capture, and in the absence of such structured information, what kind of technologies and tools you have to make sense of that data is very, very important. Today, many organizations have lots of data. That much also I can tell you. But they do not go down and then actually dig deep and then see what's really sitting in there. They actually sit in a gold mine. I'm not sure how many of you are from the banking industry. It'll always, every time an RBI inspector comes and inspects, that's when the bank gets to realize that, oh, this information was available with us for so long that the inspector had come in, because they are using some tools to compare and then correlate different data, be it technology data or any business operation related data, and then come out with a new finding, which the organization would never have thought of, right? But then us having sitting on it right under our nose, we would have just missed out on it, right? So therefore, there's a lot of this noise around us. How do we make sense of that data that is there is very, very important. And what are the different kinds of tools or solutions that you can use which can help enable that is where we will lead to. As I had mentioned earlier, the retention and safeguard matter, that is very, very critical. While for audit purposes, many of us take so much of data, the way we handle it, the way we store it, the way we purge it, has a lot of compliance risks associated with it, right? You have a PIA or PHI information being taken. In some cases, certain countries, if you're in a multinational environment, certain countries will not let you store their country's IP addresses also beyond a certain amount of time. So how do you handle all of that? First of all, how do you understand what are the relevant requirements that is there is very, very critical. So that kind of a deep dive will have to happen. Then the period of retention. So by default, if you would ask any traditional company guy, internal auditor, their period of retention is always associated with Companies Act, 8 years. I'm going to store my records for 8 years, right? Now, not all your information may be needed for 8 years. If it could be network traffic related information, you can reasonably determine maybe a 2 years time would work or 3 years time would work, beyond which you may not need that data. Even if you're going to use that to reconstruct something for something which has happened 2 years or 3 years ago, it's not going to make any sense, because network traffic for that matter keeps changing, right? Your purchasing patterns keep changing. So anything beyond 2 or 3 years for certain information may not be needed, and therefore these are the trade-offs that you can have with your management to state that if you're concerned about storage costs, then not in every case this retention period or storage cost is going to cost you. Where there are cases where you can capture it for a lower amount of time and then turn it around. And the other important aspect with retention, and again, which we have seen most often, is that, because we are touching on audit trail and data retention, many companies don't delete data also, right? In Indian law, and largely outside of India also, there is something called as the law of limitation, right? Beyond, let's say, 8 years in Companies Act, because that's the amount of time you are expected to have your data. Anybody cannot bring up any lawsuit against you, right? Provided there has been some FIR or something which has been filed and a summon has been served on you, then you will have to take that data and then keep it aside. If you have not been served any summon, but somewhere somebody had filed an FIR, but you still have the data, you are bound to give that data. Now, the problem with many organizations is that they will have data for 20 years, 30 years, especially with financial institutions. Now, if you are going to have that information and it becomes a point of contention in a court of law, you will have to bring everybody associated with that data. The processor, the owner, whoever had conducted the transaction, on whose behalf it was conducted, it's going to be a humongous legal task for anybody. So as much as we talk about data retention, organizations should also think about whether all the data that they are going to hold beyond the retention period, is it still required or not, right? Okay, I talked about some of the tools that you can use today. With humongous amount of data, it is humanly not possible to use an Excel analysis tool, right? And therefore you will need advanced programs like Python or certain Gen AI based analysis tools where you would want to analyze unstructured data and structured data together, So all of that is possible. Even an SQL query, from a database will help you, but then you will have to clearly understand where is it that you are using this extraction methodology for, how you are going to use it, right? And this last one, what you're looking at is SOAR. Today, it's slowly being mandated by the regulators, both the RBI and SEBI. We had, from a security orchestration point of view, I was talking about IP addresses, network traffic. They want companies to log this, create alerts which are automated, right? If you see a pattern, you define that pattern as a rule in your security incident and event management system, and therefore this rule sits in to analyze, and any event or any threshold that you define beyond which a particular network traffic goes, then it automatically debars that particular IP or shuts down the gateway so that that particular transaction is not allowed to be performed, right? So you have any question? Okay, and finally, now this is the most important part, which I would want to finalize with. We talked about logging data. We talked about, usage of that logged data for further analysis. How do you compare, one data point with another? What are the different sources? But most important is, who is having all the company's data, you think? Okay, the first thing is your own organization definitely should have, as long as you think that it is with a SaaS provider, and I believe that that contract is still working for me, and therefore he is having it. I'm not sure how many of you are really doing, where your company is on a SaaS platform, your company's data is on SaaS platform, whether they're really maintaining the data that they had promised to maintain. All you will.
We have lots of SaaS provider vendors are there, because though we work on SAP, I do not know, in the past few years, we have created lots of out of SAP dashboards. So there are many SAS provider, because one of my audit on CISO, we had raised this query. After that, I was transferred out of that location. So what has happened later, I also didn't have a follow-up. But this is actually a major concern.
Yeah, it's a
because
gray
he
area.
handles my data, and I'm not monitoring the way how it should be monitored. So there is a risk, which organizations are not taking it seriously.
Yeah. In many cases, they also identify that risk and they capture a risk mitigation plan for it, whether they have actually followed what they wanted to check. And many cases, they will move from one SaaS provider to another SaaS provider. At that point in time, you get a confirmation, somebody will do a data migration review checklist exercise and say that, okay, all of this data has moved in over there. But after that time, whether the other company has purged all your data, now that's one check that many times, I'm not sure whether if all of us go and check it. And whatever data that has come in, if the technologies are different.
See, checklist confirmation, that happens.
Correct.
Whether they do it really with seriousness is a question there.
Yeah.
At least in the past, we didn't have that much importance that's been given to TPRM as such, but today that is gaining relevance because of your data privacy, your cyber security related aspects, and then that's why you kind of also want to kind of get audit reports from them, frequent audit reports in terms of their controls, what they do, what kind of lacunae that are there, how do they mitigate that. So I think that's where it's all important. TPRM also kind of plays a very key role here.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in many cases, while these checks will all be there, from an operational point of view, the speed at which you can get data is also a cause of concern. Something that, our companies, because all that they would have promised is that this SaaS will also give a nice dashboard. So you believe that the dashboard is there, but then if you would go and would want to, deep dive and then extract that underlying data, the speed at which it is being made available is also a point in question, because we all get sold by that flashy dashboard initially. And then when we go deep dive into it, and that's when, we get stuck into a problem. A lot of information is again available with the internet service providers, right? You may not monitor your network traffic, but definitely there is a monitoring that is happening from the internet service provider side. How much of, if you are actually doing an investigation as an internal auditor, if you're analyzing some patterns, now what kind of information you can obtain from these internet service providers? They are also bound to share information based on the contract that you will have, whatever is the MPLS and other agreements that you have. Now, how do you effectively use that is another way. The customer in many cases will have lots of information, right? Depending on whichever industry you are into, right? So how much of customer information sharing that we try and get. And finally, most important, the regulatory authorities have more information than what you have with you, right? You can call it the government. I'm not sure how many of you are aware. By last July, SEBI had rolled out a draft circular on digital assurance. What they call as digital assurance is basically companies and their auditors will have to issue a report, which will be part of the annual report, where the expectation is to compare the company's data. Let's say if you're talking about revenue data, you're going to compare it with another external data source. For example, if you are in the airline industry, you are reporting your passenger revenue as X, then go to Civil Aviation Authority. They will have a record of your passenger footfall from the manifest that they have recorded. You are expected to compare and then tell whether these two match with each other. If you are in the mining industry, you are expected to compare your price point with the metal exchanges or the mining exchanges across the world and then give a report on if there is a deviation, why that rate deviation is over there. It had come sometime in July 25 or probably in February 2025, was expected to have been finalized in July 25. Now this is based on, so that's why they haven't finalized it yet. Yeah, they had originally proposed it to be applicable from 25-26 for accounts which are to be signed as of 31st March 2026, but then they haven't moved forward with that. But they have given everything, the template as to how the auditor will have to provide that note, and it will have to be part of the financial statement as well as be part of the annual report. The management is expected to give reason for every reconciliation difference. Classic reconciliation differences, they are saying, let's say if every organization is going to have payroll cost, right? And you all file EPF. So they're saying go take EPFO's report, compare it with your payroll, and then give, if there is any deviation, give a deviation as to why that deviation is occurring. GST records, e-way bill records, railway freight records. So they have given about 25 plus. If you are in the telecom industry, the TRAI has all call data records, including tower transfers. Every data is being recorded, right? And therefore, that is a very critical aspect. No, they've just realized that they also have a lot of information which can be put to use from an assurance point of view. So if you are going to sign up, if you're an auditor, you're going to sign up in a company's financials, you better look at data where it is actually also being available, because what you're paying tax on is also what you will have to report, right? So that is where if there is a deviation, then it becomes a huge issue. Now, because of they did do some trials and there were a lot of deviations because of the way in which data was captured. The company captures it in a particular form and fashion in terms of the segmentation, in terms of the way every region is looked at, whereas the government captures it in a different way. So all those differences, they are trying to see, how it can be worked out so that the reconciliation differences, deviation can be minimal. So that's what. So they are drawing boundaries in terms of what all data can be shared, and they are not going to share it with everybody. That is why they're saying this will be shared only with the auditors, who will be having a specific access which is being provided for, and or the company through the auditors through the company will have to take this information and for a purpose which it is stated for, right? Not every public individual can go and ask for UPI data, right? But then they are trying to draw certain boundaries around what they will do, how they will execute or exercise this particular mechanism. Maybe another 1.5 to 2 years we should have that in place.
Okay, thank you. That's clear, sir.
So, I mean, this is you can read it. I wouldn't want to put it out before I close. I know audit trail on the face of it is a little bit of a dry subject, because everybody understands, you're all internal auditors because you understand what audit trail is. But then how it is evolving and changing is what we wanted to capture. And over and above what MCA, wanted to know or wanted to do, why is it that MCA wanted only certain is something that we wanted to cover. And that's where it is.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I have one very basic question. So, we did see about logging trail stuff, right? Has there been any instance in your experience where you saw that the system generated logs were not complete or accurate, which made you question what the system threw out?
Yes, in many cases, yes. So the log integrity check is also something that, that you will have to perform, right? Number one is, first of all, how the log is getting generated. What we should also look at is like, what are the controls that the organization has around this particular log maintenance. So that is where, if you look at even MCA, they're very clear about database level tampering. Right, at the database level, if you have certain transactions, maybe in the application side, you may not be able to delete, but you can go, you can be a database administrator, go and delete a particular, table, so that the data has moved or being tampered with. So that file integrity check is very, very critical, and that is expected to happen. Okay. Any other questions? Good. Thank you so much. I'll hand it over to you. Thank you so much.
So thanks, Arjun. Nice session. One of the questions I want to ask Arjun, because I'm not permitted to ask, but anyway, Arjun will take this. How many ERPs, Arjun, have you noted they have audit trails? The year one was quite a disaster for me because I had so many calls. How many people can answer that question also? I'll leave it first to the audience and before Arjun answers. How many ERPs you've seen, good ERPs, having proper audit trails, having clean reports so that the auditor can give a clean report? Year one, now year two, now year three. We are in year three, right? So, has? Good point. SAP Rise? Are they confirming? Front end, back end? That's on the database, right? Okay. Anybody else? Oracle, Zoho, Ramco has audit trails? No, audit trail is everything, right? At least related to financial data. Forget masters, everything.
So it's totally based on how you customize the software. It is not readily available.
What happens if you customize?
Sorry?
What happens if you customize the software?
So we have to specify
our requirements. Will it retain audit trail or will it lose audit trail?
Sorry?
Will it retain the audit trail or will it lose audit trail?
No, it will retain the audit trail.
Okay. Yes? No, this is very open-ended, no comments, because this is getting recorded and gets into, so I don't want to comment about SAP or Oracle. Anybody else? Zoho? I don't have anybody from Zoho, luckily, because I signed some of those reports. Okay. It's a very tricky question. Maybe Arjun, back to you.
Okay, now because you had asked me this question, okay, this is just within the room, right? So when the particular circular had come in from MCA, softwares like Tally or QuickBooks, to some extent even Zoho, did not have what they had asked for. Basically, they did not have the immutability. Even onto the front end of the application, you can go and delete a transaction. Tally had that feature. The moment this was rolled out, the next few months, the first one to comply was Tally, and then all these other smaller software companies. The ones which really struggled were SAP and Oracle, because they brought in a database layer to it, because they always believed that in the front end, you cannot go ahead and delete it. Then institutes, Google came in saying that you should also look at the database and related infrastructure, because data tampering can happen anywhere. Right? It is very easy. If you look at Tally, there is no separation between a database layer or a front-end layer, right? So they were compliant on day one. SAP, no, again, you can log it, right? But the problem is that these are metadata, right? When you go to database, these are metadata. Even a keystroke will get logged. The moment a keystroke gets logged, for a very sophisticated software where there are a lot of interconnected module behavior, your performance will significantly drop. See, SAP had to reinvent itself and come with a HANA database primarily to address that speed issue. And then you are on top of it bringing in one more new aspect, and then you are asking to log more. That really had a huge issue. Oracle also same issue, performance issues. So storage also many companies were even willing to state that, okay, let me do that storage. I know Ramco also had that issue. Ramco, because Ramco will easily give, again within this room, Ramco will easily give a response stating, if you want, we can log. Okay, so that's the response most of the software vendors come up with. If you want, we can log. So by default, does it have the functionality? They will say yes, because this is something which is programmable. But was it really programmed in your instance? No, that is where every company had an issue.
Like SAP or Oracle able to give that management letter to say that, okay, for the period January to March, are they, because somewhere in our organization we feel there is a challenge asking for those.
Yeah, that's what he was asking, whether, in the case of SAP RISE, which is a cloud HANA version, are they very clearly calling out audit trail related aspects? No, they are not. They're saying our SAP HANA compliance report or their service organization controls report is an enterprise-wide global report. This is a very specific India requirement. India figure out a way for it.
But are they able to give us bridge letters for the period? Do you see instances where they give bridge letters and other things?
No, not largely.
So just one more question, Arjun. How many MCA's notices have been received for any of your clients for lack of audit trail? Because we put it on auditor's report.
The first year, largely many
year
companies
one,
had
year
audit
two,
trail.
Year 3 is also calm. But year 1, year 2, their notices, have you guys seen anybody? Other than one reported thing I know, MCA is issued to the company, not to the auditors, saying lack of audit trail, and they've issued notice and put penalty now, started putting penalty. Because it becomes, if lack of audit trail means books of accounts, you're actually talking on books of accounts. So it's slightly tricky part. So we need to be careful there also. Arjun, sorry to take your time.
No. So I'm very happy you asked that question. But yeah, this is where it is. But MCA is only a small part of it. Again, as I had mentioned earlier, they're trying to build the building block when we are going fully digital. But there are, as I had said, so many other things which really make sense if you understand where and how this information is being stored and how you can use it. And that's a gold mine really sitting. All right. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
So more questions mean delay in lunch, because there might be a crowd coming. So
I heard you are giving long lunch. 1 hour 15 minutes.
This is more of a future-oriented question. So we were talking about a few years back, blockchain was all the hype, and audit trail, when I mentioned blockchain, comes up to mind. So where is it moving in the direction in the industry?
It really depends on the usage, where blockchain is really used, right? Blockchain, as the name suggests, is a building blocks, right? And it comes with that immutability factor. Like you create something, you cannot go ahead and delete it or even modify it. If you are going to modify it, it is going to stay as one more block above it, one more transaction record above it. So blockchain actually solves that purpose, but where it really is being used today, right? It's today the biggest usage of blockchain is in cryptocurrency, right? All your cryptocurrency is based on the blockchain model, and it still thrives because you have that immutability with it. Because if somebody is going to tamper or make changes which cannot be traced back, then that particular technology is going to fail, right? Beyond that, they see, for example, Telangana government is trying to do land bank based on blockchain model, right? It's all in different stages of development, but not in every case you will have blockchain being applied. It also consumes a lot of processing speed and power. So it is practically impossible to bring in blockchain to every single aspect.
Yeah, previously also when this crypto thing was happening, people mentioned it has all this data, but when governments want to go and check it, majority of the persons told it is not possible with the current computing processing power or something like that in order to backtrace who used it.
Especially with crypto, take say for example Bitcoin. the way the referencing, the classification of record is all done, no, it is very, very cumbersome to read. Right? It will have alphanumeric special characters, 458 characters in length for one transaction record, in the sense one transaction reference. Then it's humanly not possible to read, or even for machines, yes, you can use quantum computing and all of that to decipher it, but whether it's really worth the cost is what you will have to look at.
So thanks, Arjun. Thanks for the wonderful
Thank you so much.
session.
Thank you
And,
for being a patient
Thanks.
audience. Thank you.
Small